I recently reviewed the new Hyper Explorer Hardtail, and today I'm going to be looking at its sibling, the Hyper Explorer Full Suspension. A bike that for many of us is a hopeful replacement for the much-loved Hyper Hydroform, and this definitely has some Hydroform DNA, but it has more in common with the Explorer Hardtail. Like the same 700mm wide, 31.8mm diameter handlebars with the hyper-consistent 60mm stem. They use these on a lot of bikes. Slip-on rubber grips and the new to bikes at this price Shimano Altus trigger shifter. This also has the new dainty head tube, but one still capable of accommodating forks with a 1 1/8 inch steerer. In this case, the Hyper HP RS branded fork with a bolt-on front wheel. And the same double wall alloy wheels with a rim braking channel and 29 by 2.30 knobby tires. And up to this point, all the components basically make this a red version of the Hardtail Explorer. There's even this snafu 1x drivetrain, which, as someone pointed out in the Hardtail review, that single 32-tooth chainring is not a narrow wide, hence one of the reasons for this bike having a chain guide. And the Falcon Saker branded derailleur with matching brand on the 9-speed freewheel. And point of correction on this freewheel. In the Hardtail review, I incorrectly said this was 11 to 42 tooth. It's actually 14 to 42 tooth. And another thing these two new Explorers share that I don't see noted anywhere is that unlike most big box 29er bikes, which have 18 to 19 inch frame, these Explorers have a 17 inch frame. And that's curious because Walmart sizes bikes by wheel size, and as I've just said, most 29ers sold at Walmart have roughly a 19 inch frame, which is fine for riders 6 feet and up, but go down to 17 inch and that's pushing it. Plus, the seat post that's equipped on these bikes is on the short side, so tall riders take note. When a company sells a hardtail bike for $248 and then markets a full suspension model of that same bike at the same price, some concessions are going to be made. And there are a few on this full suspension model, the most prominent being that the entire rear triangle is made of steel. Yes, magnetic, weight increasing, prone to rust steel, which makes the bike weigh over 41 pounds. A steel rear end on a big box bike means a non-replaceable derailleur hanger, and for upgrade as we go types like me, that's less than desirable. And I look at the other parts on the rear suspension, like the pivot arm and the pivot points, and if I wasn't coming from the Hyper Hydroform, even the rear shock has a lower rating than the one on the Hydro. Now, don't get me wrong, this still looks to be of decent quality, though I will say that the factory attention to detail, that's a bit lacking, at least on this bike, because it came out of the box with the shift cable unattached at the derailleur. And unlike the Explorer Hardtail, the hang tag on this bike gets back to the claims of rough terrain and downhill trails, which doesn't really fit, or at least what most of us envision when we see those words, but that doesn't mean it can't work on trails. For the average new rider that's going to be cautious and look for smoother sections of a trail, I think this bike is definitely doable. But I would say compared to the hardtail version of this Explorer, this is a less refined feeling ride. And part of that is because this has the same gearing as the hardtail, but paired with almost 5 more pounds and full suspension bob, it's quite a bit more wearing on climbs. And that's bad for people like me, documented hill climb complainers like this soul sucker that's the intro into Wildwood. I'm always happy to see the bench at the top. And on bikes like this, I don't make it without at least one brake. Though the spring can be tightened, and I was able to reduce the pogo effect, but not eliminate it. And even at max tightness, this is still smoother than the Hardtail Explorer in the rear. However, because the rear end moves on a full suspension bike, there's chain slap that's not present on the Hardtail. And that has led to a few unintended gear shifts when going over roots and bumps. The shifting itself is acceptably smooth, and I can hit the full range on this bike, so that's good. Everything else about the ride, reach, rider position and all that, for my 5'10 frame, it's just about right by big box standards. Though for riders taller than me, especially the ones 6 feet and up, like are mentioned on the wheel card, I don't know that these new Explorers are going to be a good fit. Because as I've said, I'm 5'10 and I already have that short seat post beyond its minimum insertion point. A bit of a snafu when it comes to the intended market, but if you're a shorter rider and have been looking for a 29er full suspension bike, this may be your ticket. All in all, there is some good here. There are the things that carried over from the Explorer Hardtail that I like, and some of the things that were less desirable carried over. But as a full suspension bike, one that's supposed to replace one of the best bikes per dollar that Walmart ever had, I can't get past this steel rear end and the unnecessary weight, and it looks visually less robust than the Hydro, and definitely more pogo stick of a ride out of the box. Oh, and the Snafu branded crank arms? That's just screen printing on top of HDL crank arms that I've seen on countless affordable bikes. Now, Hyper did give us some of what we've asked for, and I do appreciate that. And the ride, even with the big box caliber components and a little bit of pogo-ness, it's still usable. Now, I did have to do some work on it to get it rideable out of the box, and the front wheel's still badly out of true. But my biggest takeaway is I think of what I paid for this, and then I think about what I paid for the hardtail version, and that all the shortcuts on the hardtail carried over to this, and they stack up to make it less than appealing. Especially since this was highly anticipated by me and many others, the 1x-drivetrain version of the Hyper Hydroform, and it's not the Hydroform, it's a very different bike. I now understand why they changed the name, and Explorer starts with an E, so I'll give them an E for effort. But for the money and from a KevCentral standpoint, I think there are other better options. I would even choose the Hardtail Explorer over this. And compared to the Hydroform, I bought one of the last remaining Hydroforms before they went away, and let me tell you, sitting them side by side directly out of the box, I'm shocked at how different these bikes are. And I have a video on that. I'll soon release it where I go over everything that's not the same. So make sure you're subscribed and that you have that notification bell active so you don't miss it or any of the other upcoming videos, like my review of the new Hyper Carbon X 29er. And also be sure to comment below and give me your thoughts now that you've seen this new Hyper Explorer full suspension. Thanks for watching KevCentral and have a great day.